Hi, I'm Steve Cordell, and this is my 2 cents worth. Welcome to this edition of my 2 cents worth. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click on the subscribe bar. When the notification bell pops up, click on it. You'll be notified anytime I add content to the channel. Comment on these videos, like these videos, and share these videos. This edition of my 2 cents worth is brought to you by A Closer Walk with Jesus, published by 21st Century Christian and authored by yours truly. It's a great study aid for individual study, for class study, small group study. It looks at what I like to call the basics. Talk about prayer, it talks about living a Christian life, and other items that would be good for new Christians, or maybe a Christian that just wants to go back and review some of the basics and some of the things that you might have forgotten about or might have got a little rusty on over the years. 21st Century Christian has a website. You can order the book off that, or any other good study material and church-related needs can be taken care of by the good folks at 21st Century Christian. They're located at 4108 Hillsborough Pike, Suite 200. If you happen to be in the Nashville area and would like to pay them a visit, go on in. They got a nice store. And then you can give them a call at 615-383-3842 if you're in the Middle Tennessee area. Outside of Middle Tennessee, 800-251-2477, or the fax number, 615-292-5983. They are open Monday through Thursday, 8:30 to 4:30 Central Time, and then Fridays, 8:30 to 4 Central Time. And their customer service line is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 Central Time. They are closed Saturdays, Sundays, and the major holidays. And then you can also order off of Amazon.com. And if you've got a local bookstore in your neighborhood or in your town, do go to give them the business. Help them out. Help the small businesses out, and order from there. And you can get just about anything else you need from 21st Century Christian can be sent through your local bookstore if you'd like to do that. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. And now let's get on with it. Hell. No, I'm not cussing. Hell is a controversial subject in religious circles. Even in Christianity, it is there is not 100% unanimity on hell, or really even what happens to us after we die. And on this one, I got the idea, it kind of came to me after reading some of these progressive Christians and some other religions about it, about the afterlife and what happens, if anything happens then. And then while I was putting together the program for today, I came across this. I forgot to make a note of the website that it was on, but it was one of those kind of bulletin board, community board things. And someone asked this question. This is about as clear as I could get it. But the question is, hey, does anyone know of a faith that doesn't have a place of punishment, like where there's no place after death that tortures or makes people generally suffer? I guess it should be a faith with an afterlife, but no hell. And that's what a lot of people are looking for, basically, when it comes to faith and afterlife. They don't want to talk about hell. Well, there are several faiths that do not include hell in their teaching, or they say that it doesn't exist. This is just a couple of them. The Universalists, the Unitarians, they are basically one. I think they were separate at one time. There are a lot of Walt Whitman was a Unitarian. I think Ralph Waldo Emerson was too. And then William Howard Taft, who was the 27th president, if I did the math right, of the United States, one term between Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson. He was a Unitarian Universalist. Basically, they believe God's going to save everybody. And so under that school of thought, there really is no need for hell or eternal punishment, because everybody's going to end up in heaven anyway. Jehovah's Witnesses, you'll just be annihilated if you're not one of the 144,000 that gets to heaven. Or gets on paradise earth. They do believe in a forever earth situation, but if you're just truly evil and wicked and don't ever come around to Jehovah, then you just get wiped out and you're like Rover, dead all over. Judaism has no hell, and Hinduism mostly does not have a hell in their teaching, but there are a few sects of it that do have some kind of hell. Mormonism, I'm not really sure. According to some of the Mormon authored sites I looked at, there is some kind of punishment. It's in two different layers, I guess, or versions of it. but there were some that said, no, Mormonism doesn't have any teaching about eternal punishment, or does not include eternal punishment in their teachings. And then from this website, Quora, this is a website that I think you have to be a member of. I look at it occasionally, and it usually wants you to sign in, and I think there's a fee, so I never sign in. But I did manage to get this off of one of their discussion boards. What makes people not understand heaven and hell are real? That's a good question. And then here's an answer that was posted. The lack of evidence of hell's existence is the main thing, but it's fascinating to ask different people what happens when we die. And this is an interesting discussion to have about what happens when we die after we take that last breath. And there is no unanimity in the religious world. There is no 100% agreement, even in Christianity. But here was a question that was posed on that same website. What happens to non-believers when they die? Because that's usually the question. That's kind of what we're dealing with in this video. But their actions, this is what one theist said, their actions will be judged. Good ones will go to heaven. The bad ones will go to hell, where they will be tortured forever. Theist number 2 just says they're separated from God. Not real sure what he means by that, if you still have a conscious life, spirit, or soul afterwards. Or is it kind of like the rich man and Lazarus that Jesus talked about? And then number 3, they cease to exist. That's kind of the Jehovah's Witness annihilation. You cease to be anymore. Okay, what does the Bible say about all this? Well, these slides that I've got come from a sermon that I did a few months ago that Jesus told in Matthew chapter 13. If you want to get your Bible open to Matthew chapter 13, about the wheat and the tares, where he's told them another parable that he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. So the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? And he said to them, An enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Do you want us to then to go and gather them up? But he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, First gather together the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So this is one of the many parables Jesus has, and let's look at a couple of things here. First of all, notice this good seed he talks about, verse 37 and 38. The one who sowed good seed is the Son of Man. That's the explanation of the parable. Starts in verse 37. The field is the world, and good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. So the good seed stands for Christians, the followers of Christ. We've been scattered through the world and are in the field. The seed is pure and good seed. Sometimes when you buy bags of seed, I've seeded a couple of lawns. You open the bags, sometimes there would be, at least in the old days, it's been a while since I did it, there might be little bits of leaf or little tiny bits of twig, bits of dirt in there. And then sometimes you have to go through and separate it out depending on how big it is. If you put it in one of those spreaders, that can jam up the spreaders if you get little twigs or anything like that in there. But once you get the seed out of there and you've got just the seed and nothing else, you've got the pure seed, and that's what we're supposed to be. And then when the wheat grows, well, that's when the tares come, and they both look alike. You can see here on the left side is wheat, and it is fully ripe, but then right there are those tares, and there's a long name for them. I can't pronounce it. It's a Latin name, and my Latin's kind of rusty anyway. And then here is some rice grain and tares, and it does, yeah, there are some difference, but if you're a city slicker like I am, it can be a little hard to do it. And here you can see the rice up here, and the tares are kind of are down here. And I never grew up on a farm, spent very little time on one, so I really have a hard time telling some plants from telling the difference between many different kinds of plants. And the world is the field Jesus talked about. And God has sown good seed, but then Satan came along and messed everything up, tricked Adam and Eve. They fell, and sin has been a problem ever since. But notice he says there is no separation until the harvest. Leave them out there. Yeah, we'll go pull all the tares out and get all the weeds out. No, don't do that, because you'll probably pull the weed up too. Just leave it. Let it grow together, and then I'll have the harvesters take care of it. That does a couple of things. Number one, it blows away the idea of any kind of a rapture of God's people being lifted out of the earth prior to the second coming of Christ. We're going to be here together, going through whatever good or bad or indifferent that comes our way. And second, we are going to you have to share with the those who are bad. And then, we'll see the third one here in just a minute. At the end of the world, the angels reap the harvest. God will separate his people from Satan's people. As the harvesters collect the weeds into bundles. Satan's people are going to get tossed into a furnace. And there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It's going to be terrible, about the worst you could ever hope to have. The weeping indicates sorrow. It indicates remorse. The gnashing of teeth is showing extreme pain or anxiety. And those who say they don't care what happens to them after death need to really rethink that. You don't realize what you're saying if you say you don't care what happens after death. God will punish for that kind of selfishness, for that kind of attitude that does not recognize him. And then look at verses 38 and 39. The weeds are the sons of the evil one. The enemy who sows them is the devil. Now, we've made the devil kind of this cutesy red costume. There used to be a cartoon called Hot Stuff in the 70s, and he was kind of a pudgy, roly-poly. He had the little horns, and he had a pitchfork and was bright beet red and would go around and get into all sorts of mischief, and it's all kind of cute for the kids. But that, I think, has really done a lot to help disarm us about who Satan is. He's not some cute little kid in a costume. He is a real being. The Bible actually doesn't say where he comes from, but I do believe he's a fallen angel. Lucifer there in the book of Isaiah is actually talking about the king of Babylon and in its context. But I do believe logically the only way Satan could exist is to be a fallen angel. And that's another discussion sometime for another time. The weeds are those who are not followers of Christ. Matthew chapter 13, verse 38. They are not Christians. They are maybe unbelievers, maybe not. I would say in this case, these ones are ones maybe who have some identity with Christ. And the reason I say that is because they're hard to tell from the wheat. And there are times you're going to be dealing with people who are not Christians, but it's hard to tell them from the Christians. They're going to bear an awful lot alike. This is people who just actively don't advance the kingdom. They just are not doing anything for the Lord. And this is an important point because appearances can be deceptive. Many people who sit in the churches around the world are going to be tares. This is the bearded darnel, quite possibly, is what Jesus is talking about when he talks about tares. That was a plant that early on, it is very difficult to tell from a wheat plant. It is not until you get to the harvest. And so the appearance can be deceptive if you don't know what you're looking for, such as this one. Which is the sweet potato pie, which is the pumpkin pie. Because when I was about 10, we went to a family reunion. That was the first time I had sweet potato pie, and I thought it was pumpkin pie when I first saw it and ate it. But they taste an awful lot alike. They look alike. And by the way, it's the sweet potato pie. It's this one over here is the sweet potato pie. And if you get up close, you can see there is a difference in the appearance. This is more of it looks, I thought, more like a brownie. And then this pumpkin pie over here is pretty smooth. And they both have whipped topping on them, and they all taste quite a bit alike. Very difficult to tell. Now, everybody should be able to tell the difference between a cheesecake and a pumpkin pie. They don't look anything alike. The texture is different. I assume that's a New York cheesecake. And then there was a time when I was in high school, I was in a class and a girl came over to me and she said, you see, I told you we had a class together. And I said, yeah, so I know that. Oh, well, this morning on the bus, she said we didn't have a class together. I said, I don't ride your bus. What? Huh? Well, there's this guy on the bus who looks just like you. He's got a jacket like yours and everything. Oh, yeah, I know. And I asked her some questions about where she lived. I already pretty well knew who she was talking about. It was a guy named Mark, and people thought we were brothers. When I was in ROTC, and a long story short, they had pictures of the command staff. They didn't have a picture of me up there, and I wasn't available. They took a picture of him and put it up there as a company commander. Nobody noticed. We looked pretty much alike. The last time I saw him, it's been a while. We both put on a few pounds. I'm heavier than him, and I think, just about that much taller than him. Barely any difference there at all. But we did have a resemblance, and people thought we were brothers. Sweet potato pie and pumpkin pie have got a resemblance. Cheesecake and pumpkin pie, not so much. Sometimes appearances can be discernible. So in this parable, what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing two sowers. You got God, you got Satan. You've got two seeds, good and evil. And this does tell us, too, there is evil in the world. Not political evil, where people on the left like to call us fundamentalist Christians evil, but I'm talking real, genuine evil is in the world. And then you've got two kinds of people. You got Christians and you have non-Christians. Two kingdoms, in that we have got the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of the world. It's light versus darkness, God versus Satan, Christian versus non-Christian. But notice there's only one field. It goes back to what I said earlier. We are going to be here with the tares until it's time for the harvest. God's seed and the devil's weeds grow together, and it can be very difficult to tell them apart. And this is where, as Christians, sometimes we have a hard time telling people who aren't Christians and distinguishing those who aren't Christians from those who are. It is possible sometimes to make mistakes in that realm. First John tells us to try the spirits when they come in. In other words, if someone comes in and says, well, I'm a Christian, I mean, you don't need to put them in a room and put a spotlight over them and say, okay, if it's making you don't need to do that. Give them time, talk to them, ask them questions about things, have a dialogue with them, and you'll find out eventually if they are not Christians. See, the parable is about the day when God is going to separate the wheat from the weeds. And it's not always going to be the village atheist or someone like that who's a terror. There could be someone sitting right next to you there in the church building on Sunday morning. This also tells us judgment should not be hasty. Judgment does come, and it may be that, humanly speaking, this life that the sinner is, he might escape consequences for his actions, but he won't escape divine justice. A lot of people have committed crimes and done some horrible, horrible things in this life while they're going through this journey, but they eventually do face the court of supreme, universal, eternal justice. And that stands before God, and there's no appeal. Once sentence is passed, that's it. We're done. So we will be separated from the wheat and from the tares. Jesus said he would soon explain the weeds are the children of the evil one. That's who the weeds are. That's the ones that we've got growing alongside of us. And they are difficult to tell apart. And here's the thing you have to remember. You know, they'll come in and look like us. They'll dress like us. They might wear suits and ties, might be in jeans. But a false teacher does not walk in the door and say, hi there, I'm a false teacher, and I'm here to lead you astray. They're usually a little more subtle about it. They usually come in like tares. They'll look and act and talk just like everybody there, but it'll take some time to weed them out. And then the first inclination is to root out the evil. Now, this is where we have to be careful. When we see someone who comes in, if they're asking questions and they may seem a little different or have different ideas, don't just rip them out or disfellowship them or excommunicate them or kick them out or however you want to put it. Stop and talk to them. And remember not to receive accusations against anyone unless they've had a chance to tell their side of the story. But if it does become apparent, hey, this is false doctrine you're teaching, and you can't get them to repent and change, then you probably will have to part company. Those tares will have to be removed from the wheat field. And Jesus' solution to the wheat problem, of course, is that we are called to be wheat. We are not called to be farmers. That's why we really have to be careful when we start calling people out for their various teachings or their beliefs. And then discretion lets good wheat and evil weeds coexist until harvest time. Remember, God is going to be the ultimate judge. Notice he says the enemy, Jesus said the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out his kingdom, all things that offend, and those who practice lawlessness. And he will cast them into the furnace of fire. There will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So pay attention to this. That's really what Jesus is saying. Hey, who out there, pay attention. Listen to this. This is important. Jesus tells us that we will live alongside with the sons of the evil one, with those who have no interest in Christianity. It could be someone who's always telling a Jesus joke or is real critical of you being a person of faith. On the other hand, maybe someone who just, I don't care. Live and let live. You go to church and, maybe I'll come on Christmas or something, but it's really no consequence to me one way or the other. The best thing we can do sometimes is just concentrate on being the light of the world, and when we get the opportunity, confront with the gospel. Jesus says it's because sometimes we can do more harm than good if we try to pull up the tares before they have the opportunity, or rather before the harvest, because here again, that's why he wanted the harvesters to come in this story, because they know what to look for. Those are people apparently who went around from place to place. When it was time for the harvest, they would go out, harvest the wheat or whatever the crop was, and then move on somewhere else and do the same thing. So they knew what they were doing. These other hands, obviously there was concern about them pulling up the wrong plants. So rather than try to root out the tares, we are called to change the world. Just as these early Christians did, we need to overcome the weeds. We're the wheat, so we need to overcome all the weeds out there. And in this world, there always will be wheat and weeds. There's going to be tares. We will never completely conquer sin, but we can make a difference. So what can we conclude from this parable that Jesus told? Well, for starters, the world is always going to have the wheat and the weeds. We're going to be growing up together in this field that we call the world, and the wheat and weeds will be right next to each other until the harvest. There will come a harvest or a judgment where they will be gathered up and separated. You will either be gathered into the barn if you're wheat, or if you're weeds, you'll be tossed into the fire. Those are the only two options. The result is final. There is no appeal. Are you ready for that day? Are you ready for the harvest day? It could come before you finish watching this video. It could come tomorrow. If Jesus were to, if you went out to go to work tomorrow or to go to school or wherever you're going, and Jesus is standing there in the yard and he says, okay, time's up. I'm taking my people home. Are you ready to go home? Nothing doubting, to be with him for eternity. If you're not sure, then let's talk about it. Send me an email, 2timothy4.2.3@gmail.com, and I will help you get in touch with someone in your area who can teach you what the Bible has to say about becoming a Christian. If you have any comments, leave them in the comment section below. Comment on these videos, like these videos, and share these videos. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bar. Thank you for watching. That's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. I'm out of here.